The Grand Soul Charity Gala was a symphony of whispered silks and clinking crystal, a sea of the city's most important people swirling under a galaxy of glittering chandeliers. In the center of this opulent storm, feeling utterly alone, stood Dr. Temilola Adebayo. To anyone watching, she was a vision of poise and success, her elegant dress the color of deep midnight, her posture straight with the confidence of a brilliant neurologist who had flown across the world to share her knowledge. But inside, Temilola was fighting a familiar, private battle. A slight, fluttering dizziness had begun to bloom behind her eyes, a treacherous sensation she knew all too well. She had been working too hard, traveling too much, and the constant bright hum of the gala was pressing in on her. She tried to focus on the intricate patterns of the marble floor, taking a slow, deliberate breath, hoping the feeling would pass. Across the vast, crowded room, a man named Dong Hyun stood surrounded by a respectful circle of people who nodded at his every word. He was the undisputed master of this world, a man who commanded not with loud words, but with a profound and unsettling silence. His suit was impeccably tailored, his expression an unreadable mask of calm control. He was listening to a business associate talk, but his dark, perceptive eyes were constantly scanning the room, a habit born from a life of necessary caution. And then his gaze stopped, landing on the woman in the midnight blue dress. He saw the way she held herself, a quiet dignity that set her apart from the social butterflies. He also, with a startling clarity, saw the subtle tremor in her hand as she reached for her water glass. He saw the fleeting shadow of discomfort that crossed her beautiful face. For a reason he could not explain, his own breath hitched. Temilola's world was beginning to tilt. The murmur of voices melted into a dull, roaring sound in her ears. The sparkling lights began to streak and blur into long, painful lines. She knew the signs. She had studied them in textbooks and felt them in her own body too many times. She needed air, she needed to sit, but the nearest chair was an impossible distance away. A wave of weakness crashed over her, and her legs simply gave way. She felt herself falling, a slow, helpless descent into darkness, bracing for the hard impact of the cold, hard floor. But the impact never came. Instead, she was caught. A pair of strong, solid arms wrapped around her, breaking her fall with a gentle firmness. The scent of sandalwood and clean, fresh rain filled her senses, a stark contrast to the perfumed air of the ballroom. Through the narrowing tunnel of her vision, she saw the sharp line of a jaw, the concerned set of a mouth, and the intense, dark eyes of the man from across the room. Dong Hyun had moved with a speed that defied his calm exterior, cutting through the crowd without a second thought. He gathered her close, her head lolling against his chest as the world faded completely to black. A hushed silence fell over their section of the gala. "Someone call my car." "Now." Dong Hyun's voice was low, but it carried a note of absolute authority that brooked no argument. He didn't hand her off to an assistant or wait for a medic. He simply lifted her carefully into his arms, cradling her against him as if she were something precious and fragile, and walked straight out of the ballroom, ignoring the stunned whispers left in his wake. Consciousness returned to Temilola in slow, soft waves. The first thing she noticed was the feeling of incredible softness beneath her. She was lying in a bed that felt like a cloud, wrapped in smooth, high thread count sheets. The second thing she noticed was the quiet. The oppressive noise of the gala was gone, replaced by a profound, peaceful silence. She blinked her eyes open, her vision adjusting to the soft, golden light of a bedside lamp. The room was enormous, decorated in muted shades of gray and cream, with floor-to-ceiling windows that showed the glittering skyline of Seoul at night. It was beautiful, tasteful, and utterly unfamiliar. A spike of fear shot through her. Where was she? Just then, the bedroom door opened silently, and an older Korean woman entered, her face kind and lined with a life of quiet service. She carried a small tray with a steaming cup of tea and a bowl of clear broth. "Ah, you are awake," she said, in softly accented English. "Do not be afraid. You are safe here. Mr. Dong-hyun brought you to his home. He was very worried." "Dong-hyun?" Temilola whispered, her voice hoarse. The name meant nothing to her. Before the older woman could answer, the door opened again, and the man from the gala entered. He had removed his tuxedo jacket and tie, and the top button of his crisp white shirt was undone. He looked less formal, more real, and the worry was still etched plainly on his handsome face. He gestured for the older woman to leave, which she did with a small bow. He approached the bed slowly, giving her space, and sat in a plush armchair that had been placed nearby. "How are you feeling, Dr. Adebayo?" he asked, his voice surprisingly gentle. You know my name?" Temilola stammered, pulling the sheets higher. "I asked one of the event organizers after I caught you," he explained. "My name is Dong-hyun. You are in my home. My personal physician has already examined you. He said you are dehydrated and extremely fatigued, but otherwise, you are healthy." He paused, his dark eyes searching hers. "You gave me quite a scare." Temilola felt a hot flush of embarrassment spread across her cheeks. Here she was, a respected doctor, fainting like a storybook maiden and being rescued by a complete stranger who now knew more about her physical state than her own colleagues. I am so sorry for the trouble," she said, her voice barely audible. "Thank you for catching me." Dong-hyun shook his head, a faint, almost invisible smile touching his lips. "There is no need to apologize. The only thing that matters is that you are all right." He leaned forward slightly, his expression open and sincere. "This is a safe place. You can rest here for as long as you need. No one will disturb you." In that moment, lying in this mysterious man's incredibly soft bed, listening to his calm and reassuring words, Temilola's initial fear began to melt away, replaced by a confusing but undeniable sense of trust. The man who had carried her out of the gala wasn't a monster. He was her guardian, a quiet sentinel in the night who had seen her fall and, without a second thought, had chosen to catch her. The morning sun streamed through the massive windows of Dong-hyun's penthouse, painting the sleek, modern furniture in bands of warm gold. Temilola awoke slowly, the deep and dreamless sleep of total exhaustion finally releasing its hold on her. For a long, disorienting moment, she simply lay there, staring at the unfamiliar vaulted ceiling, the events of the previous night returning to her in a rush, the dizzying lights of the gala, the terrifying feeling of the floor disappearing, and the strong, sure arms that had caught her. The scent of sandalwood on the sheets confirmed it was all real. She was in a stranger's home. A man named Dong-hyun who moved with the quiet authority of a king and whose eyes held a universe of unspoken stories. A part of her, the sensible doctor, screamed that this was reckless, that she should get up, get out, and return to the safe, predictable world of her hotel. But another, deeper part of her, the part that was tired of being always strong and always in control, felt an inexplicable and profound sense of safety. This feeling was only reinforced when she ventured out of the bedroom. The penthouse was a study in serene minimalism, every surface clean and uncluttered, yet it felt strangely warm. The kind, older woman who introduced herself as Mrs. Choi served her a breakfast of savory soup, rice, and an array of colorful side dishes in a sun-drenched dining area, insisting that Mr. Dong-hyun had already left for important meetings but had given strict instructions that she was to be cared for. Later, exploring the main living space with Mrs. Choi's permission, Temilola's eyes were drawn not to the expensive art, but to a small, secluded balcony that housed a breathtaking collection of bonsai trees. Each miniature tree was a twisted living sculpture, pruned and shaped with an astonishing patience and care. They were not flashy or loud. They were quiet testaments to a dedication that spanned years. She found herself staring at a particularly ancient-looking pine, its trunk gnarled and resilient, and she wondered about the man who could command a city with one hand and tenderly nurture such fragile, slow-growing life with the other. Dong-hyun returned in the early evening. He found her on that same balcony, her fingers gently tracing the intricate leaves of a tiny maple tree. He had changed into dark, comfortable trousers and a simple gray sweater that made him look younger, less like a formidable figure and more like a man. "Do you like them?" he asked, his voice soft so as not to startle her. Temalola turned, her heart performing a small, inexplicable leap at the sight of him. She told him yes, that she found them peaceful. A conversation began, tentative and careful at first, like two people testing the temperature of water. He asked about her work, and she spoke, her initial nervousness fading as she explained the complexities of the human brain, the miracles and mysteries of neurology. He listened, truly listened, his focus entirely on her, his questions intelligent and insightful. He was not just humoring her. He was genuinely captivated. It was during a lull in their conversation, as they sat in his spacious living room, that Temalola knew she had to tell him. The secret she carried felt like a weight in the new, fragile space between them. Taking a deep breath, she looked down at her hands. "What happened last night?" she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "It wasn't just fatigue. I have a condition, a harmless one, but sometimes, if I'm too tired or stressed, my heart, it forgets to beat properly for a second. It's called vasovagal syncope. I'm a doctor, and I fainted like a child. I'm so embarrassed." She braced herself for pity, for the awkward reassurances she had heard so many times before. But Dong-hyun's response was none of those things. He was silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on her. "Thank you," he said finally, his voice low and sincere. Temalola looked up, confused. "Thank you? For what?" "For trusting me with your truth," he replied. "A secret is the heaviest burden. It is a gift to be trusted with one." And then, as if in exchange, he began to share his own. He didn't use the word mafia, but he didn't need to. He spoke of his family business, a vast and complicated network of interests that required absolute loyalty and came with immense pressure. He talked about the loneliness of his position, the way people saw his power and his money, but never him. They either wanted something from him or were too terrified to look him in the eye. "This," he said, gesturing to the beautiful, silent apartment around them, "is my gilded cage, and you, Temalola, are the first real person to walk into it in a very long time." The days that followed slipped into a strange, dreamlike rhythm. Temalola called her hospital and extended her leave. She knew, with a certainty she couldn't explain, that she could not leave yet. Dong-hyun, for his part, cleared his schedule. They talked for hours. He showed her his private library, filled with philosophy texts and epic poetry, a side of him she never could have imagined. She, in turn, made him laugh with stories of her large, loud family back in Nigeria and the culture shock of moving to America. She saw the real man beneath the powerful exterior, a man with a dry, subtle wit, a deep intellect, and a surprising gentleness that manifested in the way he spoke to Mrs. Choi or the reverence with which he touched his bonsai trees. The connection between them became a tangible thing, a living, breathing presence in the room. A casual brush of hands while passing a book sent a jolt of electricity up her arm. The space between them on the sofa seemed to shrink, charged with an unspoken anticipation. It all came to a head one evening in his private garden, under a canopy of stars that rivaled the city lights below. They were walking in a comfortable silence when he stopped, turning to face her. The air was cool and sweet with the scent of night-blooming flowers. "Temalola," he said, her name a soft prayer on his lips. "Before you fell into my arms, my world was in black and white. Since that moment, you have brought all the color." He cupped her face with a tenderness that made her breath catch, his thumb stroking her cheek. He leaned in slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, but she rose onto her toes to meet him. The kiss was not one of conquest, but of discovery. It was soft and searching, a silent question and a profound answer all at once. It tasted of truth and vulnerability and a hope so bright it was almost painful. When they finally parted, they simply stood forehead to forehead, their breaths mingling in the cool night air, the world around them completely still. Later that night, lying in her guest room bed, Temilola could still feel the ghost of his lips on hers. The kiss had unlocked a deep, yearning ache within her, a need to be closer still. The fear was gone, replaced by a bold and certain desire. She rose, her heart hammering against her ribs, and walked silently through the dark apartment to his bedroom door. She pushed it open. He was not asleep, but sitting by the window, as if waiting for her. He didn't look surprised. He simply held out his hand. She went to him, and he drew her down onto his lap, into the warmth and strength of his embrace. The kisses they shared then were different, deeper, more passionate, filled with the raw, unspoken intensity of everything they had shared. It was a slow, burning exploration of mouths and hands, a silent conversation of desire and devotion. Clothes were not discarded, but the barriers between their souls were. He held her as if she were the most fragile and most powerful thing he had ever held, and she, in turn, clung to him as her anchor in the storm of her own feelings. They eventually fell asleep like that, tangled together in his large bed, not having crossed the final physical line, but having crossed every other boundary imaginable. In that quiet intimacy, they had found a home in each other. The world for Temilola and Dong-hyun had shrunk to the serene dimensions of his penthouse. It became a universe of their own making, a sanctuary where the only things that mattered were the sound of each other's laughter, the quiet comfort of shared silence, and the growing, undeniable certainty of their love. The days bled into one another in a blissful haze. They spent mornings with Temilola explaining the wonders of the human nervous system while Dong-hyun listened, utterly captivated not just by the science, but by the passionate light in her eyes. Afternoons were his turn, as he taught her the ancient stories and patient philosophy behind his beloved bonsai trees, his large, careful hands guiding her smaller ones in the delicate art of pruning. It was a dance of two souls from different worlds discovering, to their astonishment, that their rhythms matched perfectly. The initial spark of physical attraction had deepened into a profound emotional connection, a fortress they were building together, brick by trusting brick. But no fortress, no matter how strong, is ever completely immune to the outside world. Dong-hyun's world, a world he had tried to keep at bay for her sake, was one of shadows and rivalries. A man named Jun-ho, who led a rival faction and had long coveted Dong-hyun's influence, saw the emerging news of the powerful Dong-hyun's mysterious new companion not as a romance, but as a critical weakness. In Jun-ho's world, love was a liability, an emotional lever that could be pulled to force a mistake. He decided to apply pressure. It began subtly. Temilola, on a brief, confident trip to her hotel to finally gather her belongings, found the room in disarray, her professional papers scattered, a silent and violent message. Later, a single, stark white envelope was delivered to Dong-hyun's penthouse. Inside was not a letter, but a photograph of Temilola, taken just that morning as she left a cafe, a clear and chilling warning that she was being watched. When Dong-hyun saw the photograph, the change in him was instantaneous and terrifying. It was not the loud, blustering anger of a thug, but the cold, silent, and absolute fury of a king whose most sacred treasure had been threatened. The gentleman who pruned miniature trees vanished, replaced by a strategist of immense and formidable power. His voice, when he spoke to his most trusted men, was low and sharp as a razor, issuing commands with a precision that left no room for error. He was a storm contained within a man's form, and his sole, unwavering purpose was to become an impenetrable shield for the woman he loved. He sat Tamilola down, his expression grave but his eyes soft with concern. He did not hide the danger from her. He explained Junho, he explained the rivalry, and he laid out his plan to neutralize the threat, not through a bloody war, but through a brilliant, crushing display of economic and strategic force that would break Junho's power without a single shot being fired. Tamilola listened, her doctor's mind analyzing the situation not with panic, but with a calm, logical clarity. She felt a surge of protective fury of her own. This man, who had shown her nothing but reverence and tenderness, was being challenged because of her. She would not be a damsel in a tower, a passive prize to be fought over. She was a partner. As Dong-hyun detailed his plan to expose Junho's secret financial dealings to the right authorities, Temilola's eyes lit up with an idea. "His weakness isn't his money," she said, her voice steady and sure. "It's his pride. He thinks I'm your vulnerability. So let's use that. Let him think his plan is working." She proposed a daring gambit. They would appear in public, at a high-profile event, looking more in love and stronger than ever. They would flaunt their unity, making it clear that she was not a weakness, but the very source of Dong-hyun's renewed strength. Her presence would be a statement. Attacking her only solidified their bond and his resolve. Dong-hyun looked at her, a slow, proud smile spreading across his face. In that moment, he did not see a woman who needed saving. He saw his equal, his queen, a strategist whose courage matched his own. He agreed. The plan was set in motion. At a prestigious gallery opening, they arrived together, a vision of power and grace. Dong-hyun's arm was securely around her, his posture radiating a possessive, unshakable confidence. Tamilola, in a stunning gown, was the picture of serene strength, her smile genuine as she looked at him, her love for him plain for all to see, including a seething Junho who watched from the shadows. As they had anticipated, Junho, enraged by their display, moved too quickly and too recklessly on his illegal dealings, desperate to prove his power. It was the mistake Dong-hyun had been waiting for. The information was leaked, the authorities moved in, and Junho's empire began to crumble within days, not from a violent attack, but from a perfectly executed checkmate. The threat was eliminated, and they had done it together. In the quiet aftermath of the victory, a deep and everlasting peace settled over them. A few evenings later, Dong-hyun led a unsuspecting Tamilola back to his private garden, the place where they had shared their first, life-altering kiss. The garden was now illuminated by 1,000 softly glowing fairy lights, and the path was strewn with rose petals. Under the ancient gnarled pine bonsai she had admired on her first morning there, he stopped and turned to her, taking both of her hands in his. His dark eyes were shimmering with a depth of emotion that made her heart stop. "Tamilola," he began, his voice thick with feeling. "You fell into my arms by chance, but I have spent every moment since then choosing you. You saw the man I was beneath the title, the power, the fear. You are my peace, you are my strength, and you are my heart. In this life, and in every one that may follow, my soul will search for yours." He released her hands and slowly lowered himself to one knee, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. Inside, a diamond solitaire glittered with a pure, brilliant fire. "Will you do me the greatest honor a man could ever know? Will you stay by my side as my partner, my best friend, and my wife? Will you marry me?" Temilola's hands flew to her mouth, tears of pure, unadulterated joy streaming down her face. There was not a single moment of hesitation. "Yes," she whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. "Yes, Dong-hyun, 1,000 times, yes." He slid the ring onto her finger. And as he rose to sweep her into a triumphant spinning embrace, the world felt utterly and completely whole. Their wedding was a legendary celebration, a perfect fusion of their two vibrant cultures, held in the very garden where their forever had been promised. Surrounded by her loving family, who had flown in from across the globe, and his loyal, now smiling business family, they exchanged vows under the open sky. They were no longer the doctor and the mysterious boss. They were simply Temalola and Dong-hyun, two halves of a single soul who had found their way home in the most unexpected of places. As they shared their first kiss as husband and wife, the applause of their loved ones fading into the background, they knew that their story was only just beginning, a beautiful, endless journey they would walk hand in hand. If you were captivated by the journey of Temalola and Dong-hyun, and you wish to lose yourself in more epic love stories where fierce hearts find their perfect match against all odds, then we invite you to become a part of our community. Subscribe to the channel for new tales of passion, devotion, and unforgettable